When most people hear Honda, they probably think about this. But what they're not thinking about is this. That's right, Honda, the company synonymous with front-wheel drive economy cars, also created one of the best sports cars of all time, the S2000. But unfortunately, they'll never make a car like it again. Today, we'll be driving this legendary car. We're gonna talk about why Honda developed it to begin with and why it had to die. And by the end, we're gonna settle the ultimate Honda debate. AP1 or AP2? My name's Jimmy, that's not a Miata. Welcome to Donut. Now let's start with this. So this is an S2000 AP1, and the AP1 ran from 2000 to 2003 here in the United States. But in Japan, they actually got the AP1 starting in 1999. Now these cars are modern legends, and it's easy to see why. They're front engine, rear wheel drive, and they have 240 horsepower thanks to the F20 C1 motor. You can rev to almost 9,000 RPM out of these cars. That's awesome! Whoa! What a car! It is a very raw experience in this car, and that's what makes it so fun. I've barely been sitting in this car for 5 minutes, and I have so much confidence in this car. The steering is so heavy, but once you pick up speed, it lightens, and it just, wherever you turn, the car goes. And it really just wants to get revved out. Oh my God! This is the first time I've ever driven an S2000. I love it. I see the appeal. Even though the first generation of the S2000 came out in 1999, the story goes way further back. The S2000 traces its origins back to this little guy, the Honda S500. Back in the 1960s, Honda was still really new to car manufacturing. Until then, the company only made motorcycles. But Honda, they wanted in on the car game. And while their first production vehicle was a K-truck called the T360, their first production car was the S500. The S500 began a run of roadsters known as the Honda S-Series, and they had Honda's motorcycle fingerprints all over them, particularly when it came to their engines. If you know anything about motorcycle engines, they can rev like crazy. In this case, up to 9,500 RPM. And unlike most cars at the time, the S-Series also features stuff like a dual overhead cam setup and four-wheel independent suspension. These roadsters weren't fast, but they were fun, and their light chassis, great handling, and high revving engines established a blueprint for performance Hondas of the future. Unfortunately, this early S-Series came to an end in 1970 as Honda's management wanted to shift the company's focus to more family-friendly economy vehicles that they could sell globally. The S-Series was done, and for the next 25 years, the line remained dormant. But the seeds of the S2000 had been planted, and this cucumber was ready to grow. Honda may have abandoned the S500, but over the next few decades, they dipped their wicks into the world of F1. By the mid-80s, Honda was cooking. From 1986 to 1991, a Honda-powered car won every single Constructors' Championship. Some of the most legendary F1 drivers of all time, Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost, Nelson Piquet, they were all Honda boys. In other words, Honda got really good at building engines. Speaking of building engines, around this time, Honda also debuted VTEC. This system allowed for two different cam profiles, meaning an engine could be efficient and sensible at low RPMs, but rowdy and more powerful at high RPMs. Kinda like me on a Thursday night.
Building a car, that's easy. Building a healthy lunch and dinner, not so much. But with today's sponsor, Factor, I no longer have to stress about it. Factor delivers fresh, never frozen, chef-crafted meals right to your front door, and they're ready to eat in just 2 minutes. I don't even need to go to the kitchen. I can make it right here. Pick from a menu of 35 weekly options. I'm talking meals that are calorie smart, high in protein, veggie, vegan, or my choice for the week, keto. Plus, with over 60 add-ons like snacks, breakfast, and shakes, I can spend more time under the hood and less time over the stove. Head to factor75.com or click the link below and use code 50donut to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first Factor box. That's code 50donut at factor75.com to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box.
So Honda had a lot going on by the 1990s, and it was time to do something about it. So they took what they knew about building race cars and set off to build a halo car, the NSX. This was Japan's first supercar, and it went toe-to-toe with Ferraris for a fraction of the price. Honda proved that they could build an insanely good modern sports car, but even though it was a bargain compared to its competition, it was still far too expensive for the average buyer. And even though they made VTEC hot boy cars like the Civic Type R, Honda wanted to build something that split the differences between the two. Something that took their F1 expertise and what they learned from developing the NSX, but distilled it into an affordable, accessible sports car. And seeing the success of, a little roadster called the Mazda Miata, and hearing of upcoming roadsters from BMW and Porsche, and with their 50th anniversary right around the corner, Honda decided that this car would be a roadster, and not just any roadster, an S-Series roadster. Honda didn't want to miss on this, so they enlisted veteran project engineer Shigeru Uehara, the man behind the DC2 Integra Type R and the NSX. He pulled inspiration from the world's best handling cars like the Caterham 7, and when it came to pulling from Honda's F1 expertise, he didn't just look at their recent cars. He went back and studied the granddaddy of them all, the RA272. By 1995, Uehara had a running concept ready to go. It was called the SSM, short for Sports Studied Model, and it was unveiled at the Tokyo Motor Show. This thing had the NSX's aluminum double wishbone suspension, the NSX's transmission, and an inline 5-cylinder engine. This thing looks insane. Like, it looks like a legit fighter jet because the consoles wrap around the whole way. That's wild. The fact that they wanted to put an inline 5-cylinder into this thing is kind of nuts. The reactions from the public were extremely positive, so Honda greenlit development to turn the SSM from concept to production. Uehara and his team created several prototypes for real-world testing, racking up over 18,000 miles at the Nürburgring and on Swiss mountain roads. Honda also replaced the inline 5-cylinder engine with the F20C 4-cylinder engine. The engine was mounted behind the front axles, technically making the car front mid-engine and giving it a perfect 50-50 weight distribution, something that had made the Mazda Miata so successful. Honda's final hurdle was dialing in the handling. Roadsters are notorious for their lack of rigidity. The problem is when you cut the roof off of a car, most of the car's strength is moved to the floor. This makes the body more prone to flexing. The solution Uehara's team came up with was called the high X-bone frame, which moved the chassis strength from the floor to the center of the car. Finally, in April 1999, this new S-Series Roadster, the S2000, was launched. Now, it wasn't just Honda's motorcycle heritage that they took inspiration from. They also took inspiration from their F1 racing heritage, and they came up with this Klooster that's a direct inspiration from the MP4, which Art Senna drove in F1, and it looks so cool. It's one of my favorite touches on this car. It's such a cool Klooster and very unique. I don't really think there's anything like it because it is so small. It only has what's necessary on it, a speedometer and the tach. All the controls are centered to the driver. There's really no room for creature comforts or passenger princesses in this car. It's a car meant to do one job. Put a smile on your face and go fast. And the sound it makes when you crack VTEC, there's nothing else like it. Now the AP1 is very unique and it feels a little bit more raw. And because of that, it does have its grievances with the suspension setup. It does suffer from a bump steer, which a lot of owners and enthusiasts talk about. And that's when Honda engineers figured out, we gotta change something. In 2004, the S2000 got a mid-cycle refresh. They updated the front fascia. They changed the suspension a little bit, tweaked things here and there. It's a whole different car almost, but it's not. Honda started by retuning the suspension to make the S2000 less prone to bump steer and smoothed out the car's overall feel. But the biggest change came to the engine. Buyers, especially in the US market, didn't like that they had to wind the engine out to make power and wanted more usable power in the low-mid RPM range. Honda's solution was the F22C1, a 2.2-liter 4-cylinder that was basically an F20C with a longer stroke. The F22 made the same power as the outgoing engine and even more torque. Awesome, right? Well, it depends on who you ask because there was a trade-off. The F22 had a red line of 8,200 RPM, almost 700 RPM fewer than the F20. Now, 8,200 RPM is still a screamer. To a lot of people, the lower red line meant that the car had lost some of its character. It's easy to see why Honda bros are split on this whole AP1 versus AP2 thing. So let's try and settle the score once and for all. Now this is an AP2, and not just any AP2. This is a CR, Club Racer spec. They only made about 699 of these, and they're very special. They have the front lip, the wing, the special interior. Every suspension part on this car from the factory is bespoke and has a different part number from a regular AP2. And what makes the Club Racer even more unique is no one else in the rest of the world got it, just the United States. So for once, we actually got the cool trim level. Whoa! Oh my God! This thing rips. I gotta be honest, the suspension feeling on this is a lot more stiff than the AP1. I feel like Honda's engineers saw their weaknesses and they decided, okay, well, we gotta fix that. They saw the bump steer issues. They saw maybe we should get a thicker sway bar in there. And it shows. I mean, this car is so good. Now, when I was researching the S2000 for this video, I figured by the end of it, I would like the AP1 just because I would like the higher red line. I think I gotta say, I like the AP2. It does feel like a more flushed out car. I mean, this was Honda's project car. Over the years, Honda's engineers tweaked it here and there and everywhere. They made the car better. And even though I do miss the 9,000 RPM red line, this car still revs up to 8,000 RPM and it has a little bit of a better torque range, which makes it feel so much fun. Now sure, Miatas are very cool, but I gotta say, this is a very cool car. This might be the day I'm converted. What a special car. I'm glad you guys could be here for this very special moment. Wow. Honda continued to make a few more special editions of the S2000 during its AP2 run. But in 2009, just 10 years after it debuted, Honda pulled the plug. As amazing as this car was, it just wasn't selling. In 2008, Honda sold 3,500 S2000s, but that same year, they sold 100 times as many Civics. The final year of the S2000 also coincided with the financial crisis that changed the course of the automotive industry entirely. Market trends changed, regulations got tighter. So if Honda ever wants to bring this car back, it's going to be a lot harder than it was in the 90s. For one, the days of a naturally aspirated, high-revving power plant may be numbered. Honda has always strayed away from engines like these in favor of a more efficient, turbocharged motor like in the Civic Si and Type R. Hybridization is also becoming more and more common. The new NSX returned as a hybrid, as will the new Prelude that Honda plans to release next year. Automotive reruns are extremely common these days. In the last few years, we've seen the return of the Supra, the Z, and even the Hummer. So it's possible that, yes, the S2000 will return, but it's hard to think that it will ever carry the same ethos as the original S-Series. Like I said earlier in this video, this is the first time I've ever driven an S2000, and I gotta say, it's a really special car. And we might be a little biased because this is a CR, but still, I think I like this more. And there you have it. We've settled the AP1 versus AP2 debate. So go out there, buy yourself a Honda, and remember to like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching everything here on Donut. We'll see you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.